I kept pulling on the string on what is happening in Gary, Indiana, until I found the understory. Because this is so much bigger than a primarily black community going almost 2 weeks without power. I want to pause for a minute because for the women who look like me, who are making the whataboutism comments like this one, I have a response to you at the end of this video. I want to be clear. We here in Indiana experienced a catastrophic weather event. People lost homes and people lost their lives. And in central Indiana, we experienced historic flooding. Communities like Noblesville suffered enormous damage. I don't need to minimize anyone's suffering to make a point about Gary, because what is happening in Gary is troubling enough on its own. But we have to go deeper than just the power, because Gary is more than 76% black people. And Governor Mike Braun came to northwestern Indiana the day after the storm, but he didn't go to Gary. He went to Hammond, which is about 22% black, then to Cambridge City, which is about 1 to 2% black. And on August 20, he personally toured flood-damaged neighborhoods in Noblesville, which is about 5% black. Take a quick look at these statistics for these communities. All those other cities and communities deserve the governor's attention, but so does Gary. Governor Braun knew Gary was in serious trouble because he authorized the Indiana National Guard to provide additional manpower and resources there. As I'm recording this, I cannot document him standing in Gary and saying anything. Some of you will say, well, that doesn't prove racism, but it is absolutely fair to ask what political presence communicates about whose suffering deserves to be witnessed and who are we ignoring. Here's another part of the understory. Gary residents were already fighting the electric company, whose name is NIPSCO, over what it's cost to keep their lights on. In December of 2024, residents packed a public hearing to protest another proposed rate increase. They told regulators plainly, we simply cannot afford this, but the rate increase was approved anyway. Now, pay attention to what NIPSCO said the customers were going to be paying for with that increase. The company said that approximately $770 million was going to be invested in electric transmission and distribution system upgrades, including technology, safety, and reliability. The company's own materials talked about replacing poles and lines and modernizing the grid so it would improve reliability and reduce outage times. Those are NIPSCO's claims. So, Gary residents say their electricity is becoming unaffordable and that rates increase anyway, partly on the promise of reliability and infrastructure modernization. Then we have a catastrophic storm, and thousands upon thousands of those same people spend more than a week without electricity. Now, obviously a rate increase doesn't make an electric grid derecho proof, and that is exactly what we had here. We had 99-mile-per-hour winds that destroyed a lot of our infrastructure. But my question is this: how much of that $770 million actually went into the infrastructure serving Gary? Because telling us what you invested throughout northern Indiana doesn't tell us what you invested in Gary. Now, we need to talk about what this is, because this is about hierarchy, which is white supremacy supported through Christian patriarchy. Christian patriarchy isn't confined to a church sanctuary. It teaches us a way of understanding hierarchy. Authority explains what is necessary, ordinary people sacrifice, and if the sacrifice hurts, endurance becomes a virtue. We're told to give sacrificially, trust authority, don't question leadership, be grateful, endure hardship, help your neighbor. Charity will fill the gap. And somehow, the people with the least power are continually asked to demonstrate the most resilience. That's why I'm increasingly suspicious when powerful institutions call vulnerable communities resilient. Because sometimes resilient becomes a polite way of saying, look how much suffering these people can absorb without us changing the conditions producing their suffering. Gary residents stood before regulators and begged them to understand that those increases were already hurting their families. I know a storm doesn't know whether the house underneath it belongs to a black family or a white family, but the society the storm lands on already has a history. It already has wealth disparities, infrastructure disparities, political disparities, and communities with profoundly different capacities to absorb loss, thanks to white supremacy and Christian patriarchy. So when Gary's lights finally come back on, I don't want us to stop asking, who pays for power in Indiana? Who benefits from investment in that power? And whose suffering commands the attention of the people who hold power? Gary's lights will eventually come back on. The question is, what this period in the darkness illuminated. I promised a postscript to this for the white women leaving comments like this on other people's videos, and I have questions for you. Where are you and your family standing in food lines because your power is out? Where are you calling churches to find funds for groceries that spoiled in your fridge? Where did your employer tell you that you would be fired if you didn't show up for work because your child's schools are closed? When did you file for food stamps just to get by because the paycheck doesn't cover your bills? How often do you have to choose between food on the table and gas in your car? Do you understand what redlining is and food deserts are? Look, I'm not disparaging your discomfort or your loss because of this storm, but if you cannot acknowledge that systemic racism is showing up in this moment, then you are hell-bent on holding on to privilege that white supremacy affords you. You have a choice. Stay in these spaces and wake up with us, or stay in denial. Either way, you're wrong. Stay mad about it or change. I have a writing about this that you can find on other channels as well as a longer video. Join me over there.